The Middle Ages, Chapter 9. The Middle Ages lasted for more than 1,000 years. Wars happened, kings and queens ruled, and a deadly disease killed 1/3 of the population of Europe. The people who lived long ago have touched our lives. Many ideas, laws, inventions, and important decisions were made during the Middle Ages, and it still affects our lives today. Certain key events helped define the Middle Ages. You have already heard about many of them, but the 100 Years' War is another. This war began because one man, he claimed to be the true king of another land. This time it was the English king. Where's my king? King Edward III. He was the great-grandson of King John. Yeah, and he claimed to be the rightful king of France. The 100 Years' War was not really one war, but rather a series, of military encounters that began in 1337 and came to an end in 1453. Between the battles and sieges were truces and negotiations and periods of peace. When this war began, France was probably the most powerful kingdom in Europe. And people did not expect the war to last very long. But the English, however, made use of their skillful archers. Many of those archers used long bows. This powerful weapon helped the English archers defeat the French knights. The French knights on the battlefields of France. One good example was a famous battle on October 25th, 1415. A mighty French army faced a small English army. The English archers, with their long bows, could not be overpowered by the French soldiers. Although this was indeed a great victory for the English, France actually won the war in the end. They held on to almost all of the lands that the English they had hoped to control. People fought and they died for their king and for the land they belonged to. So France won the 100 Years' War. This might not have happened if it had not been for the bravery of a young girl, and her name was Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc. Here is her story. Joan of Arc was born in eastern France in 1412. She did not go to school and never learned to read or to write. And during her childhood, the 100 Years' War was raging. The mighty French army was not able to defeat the English. When Joan was 13 years old, she began to have visions and to hear voices. Joan believed that God was speaking to her. These experiences continued for several years. When Joan was 17 years old, the English burned her village. Joan, she heard the voices again. This time, she believed God was telling her to lead the soldiers of France to victory against the English. So Joan, she traveled to a nearby town, and there she told the governor of the town that she had a message. So the leader agreed to allow Joan to speak. And Joan convinced the leader to give her a sword, a horse, and some soldiers. She was able to free the town of Orleans from English control, and she helped make sure that the leader was crowned King Charles VII. But in another battle, Joan was captured by the English. she was accused of being a heretic, and she was found guilty in a trial. She was punished and put to death. Some historians have concluded that traders who've been trading in the Middle East brought the plague to Europe. The first outbreak was in the 600s, was the most terrible of all. It's estimated at least 1/3 of the population of Europe died during this outbreak. This plague spread throughout much of Europe, and it arrived in England in 1348. This terrible disease created a sense of terror, and it spread through England and eventually went into Wales and Scotland and Ireland. The sickness was carried on fleas that lived on the rodents, and it spread quickly through the dirty towns and cities. And it affected every level of society, from nobles as well as serfs, were struck down by this terrible disease. This plague, it returned 8 times in the 1300s and 14 times during the 1400s. People fought wars differently by the end of the Middle Ages than they had before, because cannons and firearms changed what happened on the battlefields of Europe. Skilled archers and the mounted knights were no match for such devastating weapons. The machinery of war was changing, and it was becoming even more deadly. Another significant occurrence during the Middle Ages was the growth of towns and cities. This development transformed European society. More and more people, they moved from the countryside to seek employment elsewhere. Then the Lord's rule changed. People were no longer subject to the authority. The ties of feudalism began to unravel. In addition, exploration and trade opened up people's eyes to other places, ideas, and cultures. Hey, the invention of the compass was a tool used to help sailors embark on even more daring voyages. Compass. The invention of the printing press in 1450, without a doubt, transformed European society. The ability to produce books and pamphlets and newspapers helped to spread the knowledge and new ideas. Books in the past were a luxury, but gradually became more affordable. The desire and the need to know how to read and write grew among different social groups.